Keith Webb's heart raced as Raxor's tentacle-like appendage brushed against his inner thigh, sending an involuntary shiver through his body. The denobulan scientist's eyes widened with concern. "Human, why do you shiver when I touch between your legs?" Raxor asked, his blue-tinted skin flushing a deeper shade. Keith cursed silently. This was not how he'd envisioned his first day on Denobula unfolding. As Earth's leading xenobiologist, he'd been tasked with a critical mission: study denobulan biology and foster positive relations with this newly contacted alien species. The fate of humanity's standing in the galactic community hung in the balance, and here he was, struggling to control his body's responses to alien touch. The research facility loomed around them, a marvel of advanced technology that put Earth's finest institutions to shame. Sleek, curved architecture housed laboratories filled with equipment Keith could scarcely comprehend. The potential benefits of access to such knowledge were staggering. Medical breakthroughs, revolutionary energy production methods, and who knew what else. But none of that would matter if he couldn't overcome this cultural misunderstanding. Raxor's multiple thin, prehensile appendages extending from his torso twitched nervously. These highly sensitive organs, used for communication and environmental sensing, were clearly picking up on Keith's discomfort. "I'm fine, Raxor," Keith said, forcing a smile. "Human physiology is complex. That reaction doesn't necessarily indicate fear or discomfort." Raxor's ridged forehead furrowed. "Fascinating. We have much to learn about each other, it seems." As they continued their tour, Keith's mind raced. He needed to find a way to bridge this physiological gap quickly. Earth's government was counting on him. The weight of responsibility pressed down on his shoulders, made heavier by the nagging suspicion that the denobulans weren't being entirely forthcoming about their true capabilities and intentions. Keith's concerns were momentarily pushed aside as a wave of dizziness washed over him. Since landing on Denobula, he'd experienced odd symptoms: heightened senses, increased strength, and vivid dreams of alien landscapes. Was it just the stress of the mission, or something more? He stumbled slightly, and Raxor's appendages instinctively reached out to steady him. The touch sent another shiver through Keith's body, but this time it was accompanied by a flash of something. Information, emotion. He couldn't be sure. "Are you unwell, Keith?" Raxor asked, genuine concern evident in his voice. Keith straightened, mind reeling. He couldn't reveal these strange experiences, not when the mission was so precarious. "I'm fine," he lied, "just adjusting to Denobula's gravity." Raxor nodded, but his gaze lingered on Keith with increased curiosity. "Perhaps we should begin our physiological studies sooner rather than later. Your reactions are intriguing." As they entered the xenobiology lab that would be Keith's new workspace, he steeled himself for the challenges ahead. He had to master his body's responses, unravel the mystery of his strange symptoms, and navigate the complex web of interspecies diplomacy, all while uncovering the truth about denobulan intentions. The fate of Earth's future in the galaxy rested on his shoulders. Keith took a deep breath and smiled at Raxor. "Let's get started, shall we? We have a lot to learn from each other." Keith immersed himself in his research, pushing aside his lingering concerns about his physiological changes. As the days passed, however, he found it increasingly difficult to ignore the startling developments in his body and mind. One morning, as he pored over denobulan genetic sequences, Keith noticed something extraordinary. The complex patterns that had once seemed impenetrable now unfolded before him with crystal clarity. He understood intricate concepts that had eluded him just days before, his mind racing ahead to draw connections and formulate hypotheses at an unprecedented rate. "Fascinating progress, Keith." Raxor's voice startled him from his reverie. The denobulan scientist had entered the lab silently, his appendages undulating with interest as he examined Keith's work. "Your understanding of our genetic structure is remarkably advanced for someone so new to our world." Keith turned, about to respond, when a wave of scents and sensations washed over him. He could smell Raxor's unique alien musk, detect the subtle shifts in his skin tone that indicated excitement, and even sense the faint electrical impulses coursing through his appendages. The onslaught of information was overwhelming. "I thank you," Keith managed, struggling to process the sensory overload. "I've been working hard to catch up." Raxor moved closer, his appendages reaching out to manipulate the holographic display of genetic data. As he leaned in, one of his tendrils accidentally brushed against Keith's lower back. The touch sent a jolt of electricity up Keith's spine, causing him to shiver involuntarily. This time, however, Raxor's reaction was different. Instead of concern, his eyes widened with curiosity. "Your sensitivity has increased," he observed, his voice low and intrigued. "Fascinating." Over the next few weeks, Keith noticed Raxor initiating more frequent physical contact during their work sessions. A brush of appendages here, a light touch there, always seemingly accidental, but too consistent to be mere coincidence. Each contact sent waves of sensation through Keith's body, heightening his awareness and, to his surprise, deepening his understanding of denobulan physiology. As Keith's abilities grew, so did his access to the research facility. His newfound talent for manipulating denobulan technology allowed him to bypass security protocols with ease. Late one night, driven by an insatiable curiosity, he found himself in a restricted section of the complex. The room was filled with unfamiliar equipment, its purpose a mystery to Keith. As he examined a particularly intricate device, a voice cut through the silence. "You shouldn't be here, human." Keith whirled around to find a female denobulan watching him, her eyes narrow with suspicion. Her lab coat bore the name Dr. Zena in denobulan script. "I'm Dr. Zena," she said, moving closer, "and you're trespassing in a classified area." Keith's mind raced, searching for an explanation. But before he could speak, Zena's expression shifted from suspicion to fascination. "Wait," she breathed, her appendages reaching out to scan him. "Your bio-readings, they're extraordinary. How is this possible?" Keith tensed, unsure how to respond. But as Zena's appendages brushed against his skin, he felt a sudden connection, a flash of understanding. In that moment, he saw fragments of her research, human DNA, collected from ancient space probes, being studied and manipulated. "You've been studying us," Keith said, his voice barely above a whisper, "long before we made official contact." Zena's eyes widened in shock. "How could you know that?" She studied him intently, her scientific curiosity overriding her initial wariness. "Unless you're experiencing heightened telepathic sensitivity?" "Remarkable." Over the next hour, Zena questioned Keith extensively about his experiences on Denobula. Her initial reluctance gave way to excitement as she realized the implications of his changes. "You may be the key to understanding human denobulan hybridization," she explained, her appendages twitching with enthusiasm. "Your physiological adaptations could revolutionize our research." As Keith left the restricted area, his mind reeled with the implications of what he'd learned. The denobulans had been studying humanity for centuries, and now they saw him as a living experiment in cross-species adaptation. Back in his quarters, Keith received an encrypted transmission from Earth. Colonel James Hawkins's stern face filled the screen. "Webb, we've been monitoring your progress," Hawkins said, his voice tight with urgency. "Your reports indicate significant advancements in denobulan research. We need you to obtain samples of their technology, particularly any weapon systems they may be developing." Keith's stomach churned. He thought of the strange device he'd seen in the restricted area, wondering if it could be the weapon Hawkins sought. "Sir, I'm not sure I can—" "This isn't a request, Webb," Hawkins cut him off. "Earth security may depend on this intelligence. Whatever it takes, get us that information." The transmission ended, leaving Keith in silence. He moved to the mirror, examining his reflection. His skin had taken on a faint blue tinge, and he could feel small, sensitive protrusions forming along his spine. He was changing, becoming something neither fully human nor denobulan. As he contemplated his next move, Keith heard a soft chime at his door. It slid open to reveal Raxor, his appendages writhing with awe-inspiring excitement. "Keith, I've been analyzing your latest test results," Raxor said, moving into the room. "The changes in your physiology are unprecedented. I'd like to propose a series of more intensive examinations to study these adaptations." Keith hesitated, torn between his mission for Earth and his growing connection to denobulan society. and to Raxor himself. The touch of Raxor's appendage on his arm sent a surge of conflicting emotions through him. I need some time to think about it, Keith said, his voice strained. Raxor nodded, his eyes searching Keith's face. Of course, but Keith, whatever you decide, know that these changes, they could be the key to a deeper understanding between our species. As Raxor left, Keith sank onto his bed, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting loyalties and desires. He had a duty to Earth, a growing bond with the Denobulans, and a body that was becoming less human by the day. As he contemplated his next move, Keith knew that his decisions in the coming days would shape not only his own fate, but potentially the future of human Denobulan relations. Keith took a deep breath, his mind made up. Raxor, I've decided to undergo those tests you proposed. The Denobulan's appendages rippled with excitement. Excellent! We'll begin immediately. The medical facility was a marvel of alien technology, its curved walls housing equipment Keith had never seen before. As he lay on the examination table, a dizzying array of holographic displays sprang to life around him. Raxor's appendages danced over the controls, his eyes gleaming with scientific curiosity. We'll start with a full genetic scan, then move on to... The door slid open, revealing Dr. Zenna. I hope you don't mind if I join you, she said, her gaze fixed on Keith. This case is unprecedented. As the examination progressed, Keith's unique physiology became increasingly apparent. His DNA, displayed in shimmering 3D models, showed unmistakable signs of Denobulan influence. Remarkable, Dr. Zenna murmured, her appendages twitching with excitement. Your genetic structure is adapting, incorporating Denobulan sequences. It's as if your DNA has an extraordinary plasticity we've never seen in humans before. Keith watched in fascination as his own biology was laid bare before him. The changes weren't just superficial, they went down to his very genetic code. This could explain your new abilities, Raxor added, manipulating the holographic display. The increased sensory perception, the enhanced strength, your body is evolving to thrive in our environment. Dr. Zenna's eyes lit up with a new theory. What if this is a latent ability in human DNA, an extraordinary evolutionary potential triggered by exposure to alien influences? The implications of her words hung heavy in the air. If she was right, it could change everything about how humans approach space exploration and interspecies contact. As the days passed, news of Keith's transformation spread through the Denobulan scientific community like wildfire. Research teams clamored for access to his genetic data, and Keith found himself at the center of a whirlwind of tests and examinations. It was during one such session that a new figure entered the picture. Ambassador Thrix strode into the lab, his bearing regal and imposing. Unlike Raxor and Dr. Zenna, whose appendages moved with scientific curiosity, Thrix's writhed with scarcely controlled agitation. So this is the human specimen, Thrix said, his voice cold. I fail to see how this adaptation is anything but a potential threat to Denobulan superiority. Raxor's appendages stiffened. Ambassador, with all due respect, Keith's transformation represents an unprecedented opportunity for collaboration and mutual understanding between our species. Thrix's eyes narrowed. Or it represents a security risk we cannot afford to ignore. I'm ordering this human to be placed in quarantine for more intensive study. The tension in the room was palpable. Keith could feel the electrical impulses surging through Raxor and Dr. Zenna's appendages, sensing their anger and frustration. As the argument escalated, Keith slipped away, his enhanced senses allowing him to move unnoticed. He made his way to a nearby computer terminal, his fingers flying over the alien interface with newfound dexterity. The Denobulan databases unfolded before him, revealing secrets he knew he shouldn't be seeing. Schematics for an advanced energy weapon filled the screen, along with details of its capabilities and potential uses. Keith's blood ran cold as he read further. Ambassador Thrix and his faction intended to use this weapon as leverage in galactic politics, potentially threatening Earth and other developing civilizations. In that moment, Keith made his choice. He began transmitting the weapon's blueprints and his research findings to Colonel Hawkins, along with a warning about Thrix's intentions. Just as the transmission completed, alarms blared throughout the facility. Keith's heart raced as he realized his actions had been detected. Raxor burst into the room, his appendages writhing with distress. "Keith, what have you done? Thrix is ordering your arrest." Without a word, Raxor pressed a small device into Keith's hand. "Access codes for a spacecraft. Go now!" Keith hesitated for a split second, overwhelmed by Raxor's act of trust. Then he was running, his enhanced physiology propelling him through the alien corridors at inhuman speed. The cityscape of Denobula stretched out before him as he emerged from the facility. Sleek buildings towered overhead, their curved architecture a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding around him. Security drones buzzed through the air, their sensors scanning for the fugitive human. Keith ducked and weaved through crowded plazas and narrow alleyways, his newly heightened senses allowing him to anticipate and evade his pursuers. As he approached the spaceport, a familiar figure stepped out of the shadows. Dr. Zena stood before him, her expression a mix of concern and drive. "I know what you've done," she said, pressing a small crystal into his hand. "This contains my research on human denobulan hybridization. It could be crucial for the future of both our species. Use it wisely." With a nod of gratitude, Keith sprinted towards the waiting spacecraft. As he reached the launch pad, he saw Raxor running towards him, pursued by security forces. Time seemed to slow as their eyes met. In that moment, a silent understanding passed between them. Without a word, Raxor leapt aboard the ship, choosing Keith and the truth over his duty to Denobula. As the spacecraft's engines roared to life, Keith caught a glimpse of Ambassador Thrix watching from a nearby balcony, his appendages writhing with fury. The ship shot into the star-filled sky, leaving the gleaming spires of Denobula behind. As the planet receded in the view screen, Keith turned to Raxor, his heart pounding with adrenaline and uncertainty. "Where do we go from here?" he asked, acutely aware of how his changing body responded to Raxor's proximity. Raxor's appendages reached out, gently brushing against Keith's arm. "I don't know," he admitted. "But whatever comes next, we face it together." As they set course for the unknown, Keith knew that the true challenges were just beginning. With Earth now aware of the Denobulan weapon and the Denobulans in pursuit, the delicate balance of galactic politics had been irrevocably altered. Keith looked down at his hands, noticing the faint blue tinge to his skin. He was neither fully human nor Denobulan, but something new, a bridge between two worlds. As the stars streaked by outside, he realized that his transformation might hold the key to navigating the treacherous waters ahead. The stars streaked by outside as Keith and Raxor's stolen spacecraft hurtled through space. Keith's hands hovered over the ship's controls, his brow furrowed in concentration. Despite his enhanced abilities, the alien interface proved maddeningly complex. "I can't make sense of these readings," Keith muttered, his fingers dancing across the holographic displays. "Everything's in Denobulan." Raxor leaned forward, his appendages extending to interact with the control panel. "Allow me," he said, deftly manipulating the ship's systems. The vessel's course smoothed out, its trajectory becoming more precise. "We need to put as much distance between us and Denobula as possible," Raxor explained, his eyes fixed on the navigation readouts. "Ambassador Thrix won't let us escape easily." As if on cue, the ship's sensors blared a warning. Keith's eyes widened as he saw a fleet of sleek Denobulan warships emerging from hyperspace behind them. "Thrix must have scrambled every ship in the sector," Keith said, his heart racing. He zoomed in on the pursuing vessels, noting their distinctive energy signatures. "Those are the prototype weapons we saw in the schematics." Raxor's appendages writhed with agitation. "If they catch us, we'll be ash before we can explain ourselves." Keith gripped the controls, pushing the ship to its limits. As they weaved through a field of space debris, he felt a strange tingling along his spine. The small protrusions he'd noticed earlier were growing, becoming more pronounced with each passing moment. A jolt of pain shot through him, causing him to gasp. Raxor turned, concern etched on his features. "Keith, what's wrong?" Before Keith could respond, He felt a sudden connection to the ship's systems. It was as if his nervous system had expanded, interfacing directly with the vessel's controls. Information flooded his mind, readouts, trajectories, power levels, all instantly comprehensible. I can feel the ship, Keith said, his voice filled with wonder. He adjusted their course with a mere thought, the spacecraft responding to his will with uncanny precision. Raxor watched in amazement as Keith's newly formed appendages, now almost identical to his own, danced across the control panel. "Extraordinary," he murmured. "Your adaptation is progressing faster than I could have imagined." Their moment of awe was interrupted by a barrage of energy blasts from the pursuing Denobulan ships. Keith instinctively guided their vessel through a series of evasive maneuvers, narrowly avoiding destruction. "We need to lose them," Keith said, scanning the sector for options. His eyes lit up as he spotted a dense asteroid field ahead. "There! We can use the asteroids for cover." As they plunged into the swirling chaos of space rocks, a priority transmission cut through their communications static. Colonel Hawkins's stern face appeared on the display. "Webb, do you copy?" Hawkins barked, his voice tense. "We've scrambled our fleet in response to your intel. The situation is critical." Keith's heart sank as Hawkins continued. "Be advised, there's significant debate about your status here on Earth. Some factions view your changes as a potential threat. They're pushing for your immediate quarantine upon return." The transmission cut out as their ship weaved between two massive asteroids, the pursuing Denobulan vessels hot on their tail. "We can't go back to Earth," Raxor said, his voice heavy with the weight of their situation. "And Denobula is hunting us? Where can we go?" Before Keith could respond, a series of alarms blared throughout the ship. The control panel lit up with warning indicators, painting a grim picture of their situation. "Power systems are failing," Keith announced, his newly formed appendages working furiously to reroute energy. "We took more damage from those energy weapons than I thought." Raxor scanned the nearby star systems, searching for a safe haven. "There," he said, pointing to a planet on the edge of the sector. "Nexus, it's a neutral trading hub. We might be able to find help there." As they limped towards Nexus, the planet's sprawling spaceport came into view. Towering structures of various alien architectures stretched into the sky, while ships of all shapes and sizes darted between them. "We'll need to disguise ourselves," Raxor said as they prepared for landing. "Nexus may be neutral, but it's crawling with bounty hunters and informants. One wrong move and we'll have half the galaxy on our tail." Keith nodded, using his new connection to the ship's systems to fabricate false identification codes. As they touched down in a remote docking bay, he could feel the eyes of curious onlookers upon them. Stepping out onto the bustling streets of Nexus, Keith was overwhelmed by the cacophony of alien sights, sounds, and smells. His enhanced senses picked up snippets of a dozen different languages, the air thick with the scent of exotic foods and mechanical oil. "We need to find someone who can help us repair the ship," Raxor said, his voice low as they navigated through the crowded marketplace. "And we'll need supplies for our journey." As they turned a corner, they nearly collided with a tall, lithe figure. The alien's iridescent skin shimmered in the neon lights of the spaceport, her forearms crossed in a stance of clear annoyance. "Watch where you're going, off-worlders," she snapped, her violet eyes narrowing as she took in their appearance. After a moment, her expression shifted from irritation to curiosity. "Wait a minute, you two aren't from around here, are you?" Keith tensed, ready for a confrontation, but the alien's next words surprised him. "The name's Lyra," she said, her tone softening. "Captain of the Starweaver, and I think you boys might be in need of some discreet assistance." Raxor and Keith exchanged glances. They were out of options and running out of time. With the sounds of Denobulan search parties echoing in the distance, they knew they had to take a chance. "We're listening," Keith said, his newly formed appendages twitching with nervous energy. "What kind of assistance did you have in mind?" Lyra's lips curled into a sly smile. "Oh, I think we have a lot to discuss. But first, let's find somewhere a little more private. In this part of the galaxy, you never know who might be listening." As they followed Lyra deeper into the labyrinthine streets of Nexus, Keith couldn't shake the feeling that their adventure was only just beginning. With Earth and Denobula both hunting them, and the fate of galactic peace hanging in the balance, he knew that the challenges ahead would test not only his new abilities, but also his very humanity. Keith, Raxor, and Lyra followed the winding streets of Nexus, their senses on high alert for any sign of pursuit. The din of the spaceport faded as Lyra led them into a quieter district, filled with nondescript warehouses and repair shops. "In here," Lyra said, ushering them into a dimly lit hangar. "We can talk freely now." As their eyes adjusted to the gloom, Keith and Raxor saw the sleek outline of a ship unlike any they'd encountered before. Its hull seemed to shimmer, blending into the shadows around it. "Meet the Starweaver," Lyra said, a note of pride in her voice. "Fastest and stealthiest ship this side of the galaxy, and your ticket out of here, if you're interested." Before they could respond, a priority alert blared from the communicator on Keith's wrist. Colonel Hawkins's face appeared, his expression grim. "Webb, we've lost contact with our fleet near the Denobulan border. We're picking up massive energy signatures consistent with the weapon you described. You need to get there now and assess the situation." Keith's heart raced. "Understood, sir. We're on our way." As the transmission cut out, he turned to Lyra. "Change of plans. We need to get to the Earth-Denobulan border immediately." Lyra's eyes narrowed. "That's a war zone. You're asking for a death wish." "We don't have a choice," Raxor interjected. "The fate of both our species could be at stake." After a moment's hesitation, Lyra nodded. "All right, but it'll cost you. Let's go." They boarded the Starweaver, marveling at its advanced systems. As Lyra prepped for launch, Keith felt a familiar tingling sensation. His newly formed appendages reached out, instinctively connecting with the ship's interface. "I can help navigate," he said, surprised by his own certainty. Lyra raised an eyebrow but didn't object. As the Starweaver lifted off, Keith's mind merged with the ship's systems, guiding them through Nexus's crowded airspace and into the stars beyond. Hours passed in tense silence as they approached the conflict zone. Suddenly, the ship shuddered violently, alarms blaring throughout the cockpit. "Massive energy distortion dead ahead," Lyra shouted, her forearms working furiously at the controls. Keith's enhanced vision pierced the void, witnessing a terrifying sight. Earth and Denobulan ships exchanged fire, their weapons leaving trails of destruction. At the center of the chaos, a Denobulan vessel unleashed a blinding burst of energy that warped the very fabric of space around it. "Brace for impact!" Keith yelled as the energy wave approached. The Starweaver bucked and spun, systems failing across the board. Keith's connection to the ship intensified, his mind racing to reroute power and maintain their trajectory. But it wasn't enough. "We're losing altitude," Raxor called out, his appendages grasping for purchase as the ship plummeted. Through the maelstrom, Keith spotted a small, habitable moon. "There," he shouted, "it's our only chance." Lyra gritted her teeth, guiding the failing ship towards the moon's surface. They screamed through the atmosphere, the hull glowing red-hot from the friction. With a bone-jarring impact, the Starweaver slammed into the moon's surface, skidding across barren rock before coming to rest at the edge of a deep ravine. Silence fell, broken only by the hiss of ruptured coolant lines and the groan of stressed metal. Keith's head throbbed as he regained consciousness, his newly enhanced physiology already working to heal his injuries. "Everyone all right?" he called out, voice hoarse. Raxor emerged from a tangle of cables, his appendages twitching with residual electrical charge. "Functional, but our situation is less than ideal." Lyra pulled herself from the pilot's seat, her iridescent skin marred with bruises. "My ship," she moaned. "She's not flying anytime soon." As they exited the wreckage, Keith's heightened senses took in their surroundings. The moon's atmosphere was thin but breathable, its landscape a mix of rocky outcroppings and sparse vegetation. "Look," Raxor said, pointing to a structure in the distance. "Some kind of outpost." They made their way towards the building, a sleek, domed structure that seemed out of place in the desolate environment. As they approached, Keith noticed something odd. "I'm picking up life signs," he said, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Faint, but definitely there." Raxor manipulated the outpost's access panel, his denobulan knowledge proving useful as the door slid open with a hiss of stale air. They entered cautiously, sensors and appendages alert for any threat. The interior was a maze of laboratories and living quarters, all bearing signs of abandonment. Dust covered every surface and inactive screens lined the walls. "This must have been a research station," Raxor observed, examining a bank of sophisticated equipment. As they moved deeper into the facility, the life signs Keith had detected grew stronger. They followed the trail to a sealed door at the end of a long corridor. "Behind here," Keith said, placing his hand on the door's surface. He closed his eyes, concentrating, and felt a surge of bioelectric energy flow through him. The door's locking mechanism sparked and disengaged. As the door slid open, they were met with a sight that stopped them in their tracks. A group of haggard-looking individuals, representing various species, including humans and denobulans, stared back at them with a mixture of fear and hope. A woman stepped forward, her lab coat dirty and torn, but her eyes sharp with intelligence. "I'm Dr. Elena Vasquez," she said, her voice raspy from disuse. "Who are you, and how did you find us?" Keith explained their situation as Raxor and Lyra helped the stranded scientists to their feet. Dr. Vasquez listened intently, her eyes widening as she took in Keith's altered appearance. "Fascinating," she murmured, examining Keith's new appendages. "Your adaptation to denobulan physiology, it's not unprecedented. We've been studying similar phenomena here." As the group made their way to the outpost's main control room, Dr. Vasquez explained their situation. "We've been stranded here for months after our ship was damaged in an energy weapon test. We've been surviving on emergency rations and recycled water, but our supplies are running low." In the control room, Lyra accessed a communications terminal, using her underworld contacts to gather intelligence on the ongoing conflict. The news was grim. "The battle has escalated," she reported. "Both sides are taking heavy losses. And it gets worse. Ambassador Thrix has seized control of the denobulan fleet. He's using the energy weapons indiscriminately, causing massive damage to Earth colonies." Keith felt a surge of anger and dedication. "We have to stop this," he said. "But how?" Dr. Vasquez stepped forward, her eyes gleaming with an idea. "Your transformation might be the key. My research here has focused on cross-species adaptation in isolated environments. If we can demonstrate the potential for peaceful coexistence between humans and denobulans, it might give both sides pause." As they discussed their options, Keith felt a strange sensation coursing through his body. The protrusions along his spine tingled, and he felt a surge of energy building within him. "What's happening to me?" he gasped as arcs of bioelectric energy danced across his skin. Dr. Vasquez watched in amazement. "Your transformation is progressing rapidly. You're developing abilities similar to denobulan biotechnology. This could be exactly what we need." Keith focused on the energy flowing through him, directing it towards the outpost's long-range transmitter. To everyone's astonishment, the dormant system hummed to life, establishing a connection to both Earth and denobulan communication networks. "This is our chance," Raxor said urgently. "We can broadcast the truth about Thrix's deception and the true nature of the energy weapons to both fleets." As they prepared the transmission, incorporating Dr. Vasquez's research data, Keith felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. The fate of two species hung in the balance, and their next actions would determine the course of galactic history. With a deep breath, Keith activated the transmitter, sending their message out into the stars. As the data streamed from the outpost, they could only hope it would be enough to halt the tide of war and open the door to a new era of understanding between Earth and Denobula. But their moment of hope was short-lived. As the transmission concluded, proximity alarms blared throughout the outpost. On the main view screen, they watched with growing dread as a fleet of denobulan warships dropped out of hyperspace, their weapons trained on the moon's surface. Ambassador Thrix's furious voice crackled over the communications system. "You've meddled in affairs beyond your understanding for the last time. Prepare to be obliterated." As the denobulan ships moved into attack position, Keith realized that their true test was only beginning. With the outpost's limited defenses and his own unstable new abilities as their only weapons, they faced a desperate battle for survival and for the future of human-denobulan relations. Keith's body tensed as he channeled his bioelectric powers into the shield surrounding the moon. Sweat beaded on his forehead, his newly formed appendages pulsing with energy. The denobulan warships unleashed a barrage of energy weapons, each impact sending shockwaves through the protective barrier. "Shield integrity at 78% and falling," Raxor called out, his eyes fixed on the fluctuating readouts. Dr. Elena Vasquez rushed between consoles, her fingers flying over the controls. "We need to stabilize the power flow. Keith can't maintain this alone." The research outpost shuddered under the assault. Lyra hunched over a tactical display, her forearms working in perfect synchronization as she analyzed the enemy fleet's formation. "There's a weakness in their port flank," she muttered, tapping a command into her communicator. "Allied ships, focus fire on coordinates 227 by 114. Hit them hard and fast." As the battle raged above, Keith felt a strange tingling sensation spread across his skin. He glanced down, eyes widening as he saw a metallic sheen rippling over his arms. The appendages protruding from his back began to emit visible pulses of energy, each one synchronizing with the shield's oscillations. "Dr. Vasquez," he called out, voice strained. "Something's happening to me." Elena hurried over, her scientific curiosity momentarily overriding the chaos around them. She ran a scanner over Keith's transformed body, eyebrows rising as she interpreted the results. "Fascinating," she breathed. "Your body is adapting to channel the energy more efficiently. But the long-term effects on your human physiology, I can't predict the consequences." A proximity alert blared through the command center. On the main view screen, they watched as a massive denobulan flagship broke from the main fleet, descending towards the moon's surface. "It's Thrix," Raxor growled, recognizing the ship's configuration. "He's coming for us personally." The outpost rocked violently, alarms screaming as systems overloaded. Dr. Vasquez stumbled to a nearby console, her face paling as she read the incoming data. "The energy weapons are destabilizing the moon's core," she shouted over the din. "If this continues, the entire satellite will tear itself apart." Keith gritted his teeth, pushing more power into the failing shield. He felt a surge of energy from behind him and turned to see Raxor approaching, his body glowing with a familiar bioelectric aura. "What did you do?" Keith asked, noticing the changes in his friend's physiology. Raxor smiled grimly. "Temporary adaptation. I used the medical equipment to partially replicate your condition. I won't let you face this alone." Before Keith could protest, Raxor placed his hand on Keith's shoulder. Their energy fields merged, and suddenly the strain of maintaining the shield lessened. Keith felt Raxor's presence in his mind, their powers intertwining and amplifying each other. Outside, the battle took an unexpected turn. As Thrix's flagship entered the upper atmosphere, the merged bioelectric field emanating from Keith and Raxor began to interfere with the denobulan energy weapons. Arcs of uncontrolled power leapt between the attacking ships, causing explosions and system failures. "Look!" Lyra shouted, pointing at the tactical display. "Their weapons are backfiring. They're taking themselves out." A new signal cut through the communications chatter. Colonel Hawkins's face appeared on a secondary screen, his expression a mix of tenacity and concern. "Webb, we're approaching your position with the EMP generator," he reported. "Stand by for electromagnetic pulse deployment." Moments later, a wave of invisible energy swept across the battlefield. The remaining denobulan energy weapons sputtered and died, leaving Thrix's fleet vulnerable. Cheers erupted in the command center as they watched Allied ships move in, forcing the enemy vessels to surrender or retreat. Their celebration was short-lived. A massive tremor shook the outpost, nearly knocking them off their feet. Through the view screen, they watched as Thrix's damaged flagship descended, touching down on the moon's unstable surface less than a kilometer away. "He's not giving up," Keith said, his voice heavy with the weight of the coming confrontation. "Thrix is making his final stand." Lyra unholstered a weapon, checking its charge. "Then we'll be ready for him. I've survived worse odds." Dr. Vasquez approached Keith and Raxor, her eyes shining with excitement despite the dire situation. "I've made a breakthrough in understanding your transformation, Keith. It's not just a response to denobulin biology, it's a latent human ability to synchronize with alien life forms and technology. The implications for interspecies cooperation are staggering." Another violent tremor rocked the outpost. Cracks appeared in the walls and ceiling, dust raining down on the assembled group. "We can discuss implications later," Raxor said urgently. "Right now, we need to stabilize the moon's core, or none of us will survive to see that cooperation." Keith nodded, his mind racing as he formulated a plan. "I might be able to use my abilities to channel the excess energy, but I'll need to get closer to the core. Raxor, can you maintain the shield alone?" Raxor's expression was grim but determined. "I'll do my best. Go." As Keith prepared to leave, the outpost sensors detected multiple incoming signals. Thrix and his supporters were advancing, weapons at the ready. "I'll hold them off," Lyra declared, hefting her weapon. "You focus on saving the moon." Keith looked at his unlikely allies, a denobulin scientist, a four-armed smuggler, and a team of human researchers who had accepted him despite his transformation. In that moment, he realized that they represented everything he was fighting for, a future where different species could work together, overcoming their differences to face common challenges. With a nod of gratitude, Keith turned and raced deeper into the outpost, using his enhanced senses to navigate towards the moon's unstable core. Behind him, he heard the sounds of preparation as his friends readied themselves for Thrix's assault. As he ran, Keith felt the power within him building, his body continuing to adapt and change. He knew that the next few minutes would determine not just his fate, but the future of human-denobulin relations, and perhaps the entire galaxy. The corridor ahead glowed with the ominous light of the moon's exposed core, energy swirling chaotically as the satellite teetered on the brink of destruction. Keith took a deep breath, extended his energy-pulsing appendages, and stepped into the maelstrom. Moon's core. The swirling energies pulsed with an otherworldly light, casting eerie shadows across the cavern walls. Keith's newly formed appendages tingled with anticipation as he approached the heart of the celestial body. Suddenly, a violent tremor shook the outpost. Keith stumbled, catching himself against a nearby console. The ground beneath his feet shifted ominously, and he knew time was running out. Back in the command center, Raxor's eyes widened as he monitored the moon's deteriorating condition. "We're losing structural integrity," he called out, his fingers dancing across the controls. "Keith, whatever you're planning, do it fast." Lyra unholstered her weapon, her forearms moving with practiced efficiency. "We've got company," she announced, gesturing to the tactical display. "Thrix and his goons are making their move." Dr. Vasquez hurried to a nearby terminal, her face etched with concentration. "I'm reinforcing the outpost's defenses, but they won't hold for long against those energy weapons." Keith's voice crackled over the comm system. "I'm at the core. It's incredible. I think I can stabilize it, but I'll need time." As if on cue, the outpost rocked with the impact of enemy fire. Alarms blared throughout the complex, warning of multiple hull breaches. "Time is something we don't have," Lyra growled, moving toward the main entrance. "I'll buy you what I can. Raxor, keep that shield up." Outside, Ambassador Thrix led his forces across the moon's fractured surface. Energy weapons hummed to life, their eerie glow illuminating the advancing denobulins. Thrix's eyes burned with fanatical intensity as he raised his arm, signaling the attack. The first volley of energy blasts slammed into the outpost shields. Raxor grunted with the effort of maintaining the protective barrier, his body pulsing with bioelectric energy. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he poured more power into the defense grid. Inside the core chamber, Keith extended his transformed arms toward the swirling vortex of energy. As his fingertips brushed the surface, he gasped. Information flooded his mind, complex equations, swirling star maps, and glimpses of an ancient, long-lost civilization. "Dr. Vasquez," he called out, his voice strained. "There's something here, some kind of artifact. It's not just the moon's core, it's alive." Elena's eyes widened at this revelation. She furiously typed commands into her console, analyzing the new data. Incredible, she breathed. This could change everything we know about energy manipulation and interspecies dynamics. Another impact rocked the outpost. Lyra's voice cut through the chaos. Whatever you're doing, do it faster. We've got Thrix's whole damn army out here. Keith gritted his teeth, pushing deeper into the energy field. He felt his body changing, adapting to the massive influx of power. His skin took on a crystalline sheen, refracting the pulsing light around him. In orbit, Colonel Hawkins watched the battle unfold with growing concern. The moon's instability was reaching critical levels, threatening to tear the satellite apart. He made a snap decision. All units, prepare for immediate drop, he ordered, strapping himself into a tactical descent pod. We're joining the fight. As Earth's special forces plummeted toward the lunar surface, the battle outside the outpost intensified. Lyra led a group of scientists in a daring counterattack, using their knowledge of the terrain to outmaneuver Thrix's soldiers. Energy blasts crisscrossed the battlefield, igniting pockets of gas and sending plumes of lunar dust into the thin atmosphere. Raxor, still maintaining the shield, felt a sudden shift in the energy flow. "Keith," he called out, "something's changing. The core, it's stabilizing." In the heart of the moon, Keith stood at the center of a maelstrom of light and information. The artifact pulsed in sync with his own bioelectric field, its ancient systems recognizing him as a conduit. He saw glimpses of its true purpose, not just a power source, but a repository of knowledge that spanned millennia. As the artifact's energy balanced, a massive tremor shook the moon. Fissures opened across the surface, forcing both Thrix's forces and the outpost defenders to scramble for stable ground. Deep in the newly formed chasms, glimpses of crystalline structures could be seen, more artifacts hidden for eons beneath the lunar crust. Thrix, his eyes wild with desperation and greed, spotted the telltale glow from a nearby crevasse. "The source," he hissed. "It will be mine." Without a backward glance at his embattled forces, the ambassador sprinted toward the fissure. Colonel Hawkins and his team touched down amidst the chaos, immediately engaging Thrix's remaining loyalists. "Webb," he barked into his comm. "Status report." Keith's voice came back distorted, overlaid with harmonics that seemed to resonate with the very fabric of space. "Colonel, we've got a situation here. This artifact, it's not just denobulan, it's older. Much older." Raxor, sensing the shift in the battle, made a decision. "I'm going after Thrix," he announced. "Lyra, can you hold here?" The four-armed smuggler grinned fiercely, hefting her weapon. "Born ready, go get that bastard." As Raxor charged after the fleeing ambassador, Keith delved deeper into the artifact's systems. The knowledge it contained was overwhelming. Star charts of uncharted regions, theories of physics that defied current understanding, and glimpses of civilizations long since turned to dust. But with revelation came danger. The artifact's power surge triggered chain reactions throughout the moon's unstable core. New fissures opened, threatening to tear the satellite apart. "Keith!" Dr. Vasquez's voice cut through his connection to the artifact. "The moon's breaking up. We need to evacuate." In the twisting tunnels that led to the core, Raxor and Colonel Hawkins raced after Thrix. The ambassador's knowledge of denobulan technology gave him an edge, allowing him to navigate the collapsing passages with uncanny precision. "He's heading straight for the artifact," Raxor growled, his body pulsing with barely held back energy. "If he reaches it before Keith can stabilize the core..." Hawkins nodded grimly, checking his weapon's charge. "Then we make sure he doesn't." As they descended deeper into the moon's fractured interior, the walls around them began to glow with an otherworldly light. The artifact's influence was spreading, awakening long-dormant systems throughout the satellite. In the core chamber, Keith stood at the center of a technological marvel beyond imagination. The artifact's crystalline structure had expanded, filling the cavern with a lattice of pulsing energy conduits. His body, now more energy than matter, served as the focal point for the entire system. Through his connection to the artifact, Keith sensed Thrix's approach. The ambassador's desperation and avarice were palpable, a dark stain against the ancient wisdom contained within the crystal matrix. As Thrix burst into the chamber, his eyes wild with triumph. Keith made a fateful decision. He opened himself fully to the artifact's power, allowing its energy to flow through him unimpeded. His physical form dissolved, becoming one with the pulsing light that filled the cavern. Raxor and Hawkins arrived moments later, weapons raised, but they froze at the threshold, awestruck by the scene before them. Where Keith had stood was now a being of pure energy, its form constantly shifting and refracting. Thrix, his hand outstretched toward the artifact, turned to face the newcomers. His expression twisted with a mixture of rage and fear as he realized the true nature of what he had unleashed. As the four stood locked in a tense standoff, the moon trembled ominously around them. The fate of two civilizations, and perhaps the entire galaxy, hung in the balance. The confrontation that would shape the future of human-denobulan relations was about to reach its climax, deep within the heart of a dying moon. The energy coursing through Keith's body intensified, his form flickering between solid matter and pure light. As he interfaced with the ancient artifact, a torrent of information flooded his mind. Visions of a long-lost civilization flashed before his eyes. Vast cities spanning entire solar systems. Technology that defied the laws of physics as he understood them, and a race of beings who had mastered the fundamental forces of the universe. Keith gasped, overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of knowledge pouring into his consciousness. He saw star maps of uncharted regions, theories of energy manipulation that made current understanding seem primitive, and glimpses of a galactic empire that had flourished eons ago. As Keith delved deeper into the artifact's secrets, the battle around him reached a fever pitch. Raxor and Colonel Hawkins engaged Ambassador Thrix and his loyalists in a desperate struggle for control of the chamber. Energy weapons discharged, their beams ricocheting off the crystalline walls and creating a deadly light show. Raxor's body pulsed with bioelectric energy as he generated protective fields around himself and Hawkins. "Stay close," he shouted over the din of battle. "These shields won't hold forever." Thrix, his eyes wild with desperation, activated a portable energy barrier. The shimmering field deflected a barrage of shots from Hawkins's weapon. "You cannot stop progress," Thrix snarled, returning fire with his own energy pistol. The ground beneath their feet trembled violently, and chunks of the ceiling crashed down around them. Lyra's voice crackled over the comm system, laden with urgency. "We've got less than an hour before this rock tears itself apart. Whatever you're doing down there, do it fast." Keith, still connected to the artifact, began to understand the intricate web of energy flowing through the moon's core. He saw how the crystal's power could be redirected, used to reinforce the failing structure of the satellite. But the complexity of the task was daunting, requiring precise control over an immense amount of energy. As Keith focused his efforts on stabilizing the core, his body underwent another startling transformation. His skin became translucent, pulsing with the same ethereal light that filled the chamber. Energy coursed through his veins, replacing blood with pure power. Thrix, sensing a shift in the energy currents, made his move. With a maniacal grin, he overloaded his energy weapon, creating a massive surge that sent Raxor and Hawkins flying backward. In the chaos that followed, Thrix charged toward Keith and the artifact, his hand outstretched to claim its power. Keith's heightened awareness allowed him to perceive the threat, even as he grappled with the moon's destabilizing core. In a split second, he generated a powerful bioelectric field around himself. The barrier collided with Thrix mid-lunge, hurling the ambassador against the chamber wall with bone-jarring force. Raxor, shaking off the effects of Thrix's attack, scrambled to Keith's side. Without hesitation, he linked his own bioelectric field with Keith's. The effect was immediate and powerful. Their combined energies amplified exponentially, creating a swirling vortex of light and power. Through their shared connection, Raxor felt the strain on Keith's body. "Hold on," he urged, pouring more of his own energy into the link. "We can do this together." Keith nodded, his features barely visible through the corona of energy surrounding him. With Raxor's support, he began to redirect the artifact's power, channeling it into the moon's rocky core. Fissures that had threatened to tear the satellite apart began to close, the very fabric of the moon knitting itself back together. As Keith and Raxor worked to save the moon, Colonel Hawkins engaged Thrix in brutal hand-to-hand combat. The two grappled at the edge of a newly formed chasm, each seeking to gain the upper hand. Hawkins's special forces training served him well as he maneuvered Thrix into a vulnerable position. With a swift, decisive move, Hawkins disarmed the ambassador. Thrix's energy weapon tumbled into the abyss, disappearing into the depths of the moon. "It's over, Thrix," Hawkins growled, securing the defeated Denobulan's hands behind his back. Lyra's voice came through the comm once more, this time tinged with relief. "The tremors are subsiding. Whatever you're doing, it's working." As the immediate danger passed, Keith's connection to the artifact deepened. He saw beyond its role as a power source, understanding its true purpose. The crystal was a seed, designed to nurture and accelerate the development of new civilizations. It contained not just knowledge, but the means to jumpstart evolution itself. The implications were staggering. Keith realized that this discovery could revolutionize both human and Denobulan societies, ushering in an era of unprecedented growth and cooperation. But the strain of channeling such vast energies was taking its toll. Keith's hybrid physiology began to falter, his skin flickering rapidly between its human appearance and the crystalline structure it had adopted. Raxor, still linked with Keith, sensed the danger. "Keith, we need to disconnect," Raxor urged, attempting to sever their connection to the artifact. "Your body can't handle much more of this." As Raxor struggled to pull Keith free, a massive surge of energy pulsed through the crystal. The feedback created a shock wave that shook the chamber, causing a partial collapse of the ceiling. Keith and Raxor found themselves cut off from the others, separated by a wall of fallen debris. "Keith, Raxor!" Hawkins called out, his voice muffled by the rock barrier. "Are you all right?" "We're okay," Raxor responded, his eyes fixed on Keith's fluctuating form. "But we need to find another way out. Get the others to safety. We'll meet you on the surface." As the sounds of Hawkins and the others retreating faded, Keith and Raxor faced a critical moment. The artifact's pull on Keith remained strong, offering untold power and knowledge. But the cost of that power was becoming clear. To fully embrace it might mean losing his humanity entirely. Raxor, torn between his growing feelings for Keith and his duty to his people, struggled with his own decision. The power Keith now wielded could change the course of galactic history, but at what cost? "Keith," Raxor said softly, placing a hand on his companion's shoulder. "We need to move. This chamber won't hold much longer." Keith turned to face Raxor, his eyes now glowing with the same energy that pulsed through the artifact. "I can see so much, Raxor," he whispered, his voice overlaid with harmonics that seemed to resonate with the very air around them. "The potential, it's incredible." The ground beneath their feet trembled ominously, reminding them of the precarious situation they faced. Raxor glanced at the partially exposed core, then back at Keith. "Whatever we decide, we need to decide now," he urged. Keith nodded, the weight of the choice before him evident in his expression. As he prepared to make his decision, another tremor shook the chamber, sending a shower of crystals cascading from the ceiling. The fate of two civilizations, and perhaps the entire galaxy, hung in the balance as Keith and Raxor stood at the precipice of a new era, the ancient artifact pulsing with possibility before them. In that moment, Keith's transformation accelerated. His skin became completely translucent, revealing a complex network of glowing energy pathways beneath. The chamber filled with an otherworldly light emanating from his body. Raxor gasped, his own form beginning to change as well. Though less intense than Keith's metamorphosis, Raxor's skin took on a luminescent quality, pulsing in sync with the bioelectric field connecting them. "Keith," Raxor said, his voice tinged with awe and concern, "what's happening to us?" Keith's eyes, now twin pools of swirling energy, fixed on Raxor. When he spoke, his voice reverberated with harmonics that seemed to resonate with the very fabric of space-time. "I can see it all, Raxor. The knowledge, it's overwhelming." As Keith processed the vast influx of information, his expression shifted from wonder to grave concern. "They had the power to traverse the galaxy in an instant," he whispered. "Wormholes, Raxor. Stable wormholes that could revolutionize everything we know about space travel." Raxor's eyes widened. "That's incredible. With that kind of technology we could— No, Keith interrupted, his voice heavy with the weight of newfound wisdom. It destroyed them. The wormholes, they destabilized space-time itself, an entire civilization, wiped out by their own ambition. The chamber shuddered violently, sending a shower of crystals raining down around them. A massive crack split the floor, revealing the pulsing energy of the moon's unstable core beneath. Raxor stumbled, steadying himself against a crystalline formation. "Keith, we need to go. This place is falling apart." Keith nodded, his ethereal form flickering like a candle in the wind. "You're right, but I can't control this. There's too much energy, too much information. I don't know if I can hold on to my physical form." Raxor's expression hardened with willpower. He reached out, grasping Keith's translucent hand firmly. "Focus on me," he urged. "Use our connection. I'll help ground you." As they stood linked, Raxor felt the immense strain Keith was under. The hybrid's body trembled, struggling to contain the vast energies coursing through it. Raxor poured more of his own bioelectric energy into their shared link, creating a buffer against the overwhelming power of the artifact. "That's it," Raxor encouraged, watching as Keith's form slowly began to stabilize. "Come back to me, Keith." Keith's eyes cleared slightly, focusing on Raxor's face. With visible effort, he began the process of disconnecting from the artifact. As he did so, a surge of energy pulsed through him. Keith instinctively directed it outward, sending a controlled wave of power through the moon's core and beyond. The effect was immediate. The violent tremors subsided, the cracks in the chamber walls sealing themselves. In orbit above, the weapons systems of both human and Denobulan ships flickered and died, rendered temporarily inert by the energy pulse. As the connection to the artifact severed, Keith's body began to revert to its previous state. However, traces of his transformation remained. His skin retained a faint, otherworldly glow, and small arcs of bioelectric energy danced across his fingertips. I think I'm okay," Keith said, his voice returning to normal. He swayed slightly, leaning on Raxor for support. "But we need to get out of here. There's so much I need to tell you, to tell everyone." Raxor nodded, guiding Keith towards a newly formed tunnel. "Can you walk? The others can't be far ahead." As they made their way through the stabilized passages, Keith's mind raced. He had retained a carefully selected portion of the artifact's knowledge, information that could benefit both humans and Denobulans without revealing the dangerous wormhole technology. They rounded a corner to find Lyra waiting for them, her expression a mixture of relief and amazement. "There you are. I was starting to think I'd have to drag you out myself." She paused, taking in their altered appearances. "What happened down there?" Before Keith could respond, Colonel Hawkins emerged from an adjacent tunnel, a subdued Ambassador Thrix in tow. Hawkins's eyes widened at the sight of Keith and Raxor. "I'll be damned," he muttered. "You two look like you've been through hell and back." Keith managed a weak smile. "Something like that. Is everyone else safe?" Hawkins nodded. "All accounted for. But we've got a situation up top. That energy pulse you sent out has everyone on edge. Both sides are demanding answers." "Then let's give them some," Keith said, straightening up. "It's time we put an end to this conflict once and for all." As the group made their way to the surface, Keith filled them in on what he had learned. He carefully omitted any mention of the wormhole technology, focusing instead on the potential for cooperation and shared advancement. They emerged onto the moon's surface to find a tense standoff between human and Denobulan peacekeeping forces. All eyes turned to Keith as he stepped forward, his faintly glowing skin marking him as something beyond ordinary. "Representatives of Earth and Denobula," Keith began, his voice carrying an authority born of his recent transformation. "What we have discovered here today has the potential to change everything, but only if we choose to work together." As Keith spoke, laying out a vision of cooperation and shared discovery, the tension in the air began to dissipate. Even Ambassador Thrix, humbled by his ordeal, stepped forward to offer his support for a peaceful resolution. Colonel Hawkins, after a moment's hesitation, made his decision. "I propose a joint research initiative," he announced, "with Keith and Raxor as lead researchers. We have an opportunity here to build something truly remarkable. As negotiations began in earnest, Keith found a quiet moment with Raxor. "This is just the beginning," he said softly, watching as humans and denobulans cautiously began to mingle. "We have a long road ahead of us." Raxor smiled, taking Keith's hand in his own. A small spark of bioelectric energy passed between them. "Whatever comes next," he said, "we'll face it together." As the sun began to rise over the lunar horizon, casting long shadows across the gathered delegates, Keith realized that this was more than just a new chapter for him and Raxor. It was the dawn of a new era for both their species, filled with challenges and possibilities beyond imagining. The artifact's legacy would shape the future of human-denobulan relations for generations to come. And at the center of it all stood Keith and Raxor, their unique bond serving as a living symbol of what could be achieved when two worlds came together. As the discussions continued around them, Keith's mind turned to the vast expanse of space beyond. The artifact had shown him glimpses of wonders and terrors yet undiscovered. He knew that this was only the first step on a much longer journey, one that would take humanity and the denobulans to the very edges of the known universe and beyond. Beyond. As the discussions continued, Keith found his gaze drawn to Raxor, their shared experience in the artifact chamber, having forged a connection deeper than he could have imagined. In the weeks that followed, Earth and Denobula established a joint research initiative, with Keith and Raxor at its helm. The two worked tirelessly, studying the effects of the artifact and exploring the potential of their unique hybrid physiologies. Their lab became a second home, filled with the hum of advanced equipment and the excited chatter of human and denobulan scientists working side by side. Keith leaned over a microscope, examining a sample of his own tissue. The faint glow beneath his skin had persisted, a constant reminder of his transformation. "Raxor, come take a look at this," he called out, his voice tinged with excitement. Raxor moved closer, his body heat radiating against Keith's side. As he peered into the microscope, Keith became acutely aware of their proximity. Raxor's appendages brushed against Keith's inner thigh as he adjusted his position, sending an involuntary shiver through the human's body. Raxor looked up, curiosity evident in his expression. "Human, why do you shiver when I touch between your legs?" Keith felt heat rise to his cheeks, caught off guard by the innocent question. He took a deep breath, realizing this moment could lead to a deeper understanding between them. "It's a sensitive area for humans," he explained carefully. "Touch there can be pleasurable in the right context." Raxor's eyes widened with interest. "Fascinating. Denobulan physiology is quite different in that regard. Our most sensitive areas are located along our spinal ridges." Their conversation flowed naturally from there, each sharing insights into their species' concepts of intimacy and pleasure. As they spoke, Keith felt the last barriers between them crumbling away, replaced by a deep emotional connection. Their relationship blossomed in the following months, becoming a symbol of successful human-denobulan integration. Public appearances together inspired hope and acceptance among both species. However, they soon faced challenges from conservative factions on both planets who feared the implications of interspecies relationships. Determined to prove the benefits of their union, Keith and Raxor proposed a groundbreaking experiment. They stood before a panel of human and denobulan officials, presenting their plan to use their combined bioelectric abilities to interface with a modified version of the artifact. "By harnessing our unique physiologies," Keith explained, gesturing to the holographic display behind him, "we believe we can unlock the artifact's potential for clean energy production without the risks of the wormhole technology." The experiment was approved, and a specially constructed facility was built on Earth's moon. On the day of the test, representatives from both planets gathered in the observation room, their faces a mix of anticipation and apprehension. Keith and Raxor stood at the center of the chamber, surrounded by a complex array of sensors and energy conduits. They faced each other, hands clasped, forming a circuit with their bodies. "Ready?" Keith asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Raxor nodded, his appendages quivering slightly. "With you. Always." They closed their eyes, focusing on the bioelectric energy flowing between them. The modified artifact, suspended in a containment field nearby, began to pulse in response to their combined frequency. The chamber filled with a soft, ethereal light as Keith and Raxor's bodies began to glow. Energy arced between them and the artifact, creating a dazzling display of power. The observers watched in awe as readings on their instruments spiked to unprecedented levels. Suddenly, a surge of power flowed through. Keith and Raxor momentarily overloading the facility's systems. In that instant of intense connection, their minds melded in a way that transcended physical boundaries. Keith felt himself immersed in the collective memory of Denobula, experiencing millennia of history and culture in a matter of seconds. Beside him, Raxor gasped as he was flooded with the full breadth of human experience. As the energy subsided, Keith and Raxor found themselves forever changed. Their physiologies had reached a perfect balance between human and Denobulan, each gaining traits from the other. Keith's skin now bore a faint, iridescent pattern reminiscent of Denobulan markings, while Raxor's appendages had become more dexterous, almost hand-like in their functionality. The experiment's success ushered in a new era of cooperation between Earth and Denobula. The clean energy technology derived from the artifact revolutionized both societies, solving resource scarcity issues and enabling rapid advancement in space exploration. Keith and Raxor's unique abilities and insights proved invaluable in implementing these new technologies safely. They worked tirelessly, traveling between Earth and Denobula to oversee the integration of the new energy systems. Their efforts did not go unnoticed. In a joint ceremony attended by leaders from both worlds, Keith and Raxor were appointed as joint ambassadors, tasked with fostering relations with other alien species. Years passed, and their story became legendary, inspiring countless others to embrace interspecies, relationships, and cultural exchange. The once sharp lines between human and Denobulan began to blur, creating a rich tapestry of shared culture and innovation. On the eve of their greatest adventure yet, Keith and Raxor stood on the observation deck of the UES Horizon, the first exploration vessel powered by the clean energy technology they had helped develop. The ship hummed with potential, ready to carry them to the far reaches of the galaxy. Keith gazed out at the stars, marveling at how far they had come. He felt Raxor's presence beside him, a constant source of strength and companionship. Their fingers intertwined, a gesture that bridged their two species in a way that once seemed impossible. "Ready for our next adventure?" Keith asked, turning to face his partner with a playful smile. Raxor's appendages quivered with excitement, his eyes shining with the same sense of wonder that had first drawn them together. "With you, my love, I'm ready for anything." As the Horizon prepared for departure, Keith and Raxor's thoughts turned to the vast unknown that lay ahead. Their journey had already transformed two worlds, but they knew that the true test of their legacy was yet to come. With the power of the artifact and the strength of their bond, they stood poised to shape the future of intergalactic relations. The ship's engines hummed to life, filling the observation deck with a low vibration. Keith and Raxor shared one last look at the Earth-Moon system growing smaller behind them. Whatever challenges awaited them in the depths of space, they would face them together, their union a living testament to the power of understanding and collaboration across the stars.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.